Norfolk, Virginia. Winter air cutting across the piers like a razor. A sailor's shadow moves between stacks of classified communication logs, calm, deliberate, almost invisible. No alarms, no suspicion. And that is the problem. John Anthony Walker, Jr., a 37-year-old U.S. Navy Chief Warrant Officer, signs the logbook as if it's any other night shift. Then he slips a sealed envelope into his coat. Inside it, the crypto keys that protect America's. Global naval communications keys that, once in Soviet hands, will open every message the U.S. Navy sends for nearly 2 decades. The Moscow Center has been hunting for a perfect mole. Tonight, they get one. Hours later, Walker walks into a dead-drop zone behind a Maryland motel, leaves the envelope, walks away. The KGB retrieves it within minutes. No contact, no words, just a quiet surgical exchange that marks the beginning of the most damaging naval espionage operation in American history. The Soviets are stunned by the quality of the material. For the first time, they can read American naval movements in real time, submarine patrol routes, encrypted fleet commands, nuclear launch protocols. Inside the Kremlin's high-security war rooms, analysts stare at the decrypted documents like they are looking into America's bloodstream. Walker continues his routine the next morning. Coffee, uniform inspection, a joke with his commanding officer. No one notices that the Navy has already been compromised at the root. And no one knows that Walker is about to expand his operation even further, recruiting his own family into the spy ring, turning a domestic life into a covert network engineered for betrayal. History will remember the Walker spy ring as a catastrophic intelligence disaster. But on this night, it is only a beginning. The Soviet Residentura in Washington can hardly believe its luck. Their new mole isn't just delivering gold, he's delivering the crown jewels. But John Walker has a problem. He wants more money, and to get more money, he needs more access. One man, no matter how talented, can only steal so much. So he does the unthinkable. He recruits Blood, his first target, his teenage son, Michael. A kid who should be thinking about college, cars, and escaping his father's shadow. Instead, Walker hands him a camera and instructions how to photograph encrypted signals manuals without leaving fingerprints, how to pass material across state lines without being noticed, how to stash microfilm inside a shaving kit. Michael hates it, but he also wants his father's approval, and Walker knows exactly which emotional wires to pull. Next, Walker brings in his older brother, Arthur, a retired Navy petty officer living a quiet suburban life. Arthur thinks he's helping with consulting work until Walker reveals the real mission. By then, the money has already clouded his judgment. Greed beats conscience. And finally, shockingly, John recruits his close friend, Jerry Whitworth, a brilliant Navy communications specialist with top clearance and a dangerously naive sense of loyalty. Whitworth's skills give Walker access to highly sensitive radio telecommunication keys, opening an entirely new stream of intelligence for the KGB. Within 2 years, the Walker family is no longer a family. They are a functioning espionage enterprise, one feeding the Soviet Union with thousands of classified documents every month. Meanwhile, inside the Moscow Center's Special Operations Directorate, analysts begin cataloging the incoming intelligence under a new codename. To them, this isn't just a mole. This is an American pipeline. Every message the U.S. Navy sends, every submarine that deploys, every carrier movement in the Pacific, all of it is laid bare. And still, no one in Washington suspects a thing. Inside the Moscow Center's high-security vault, couriers unload Walker's latest shipment. Overstuffed envelopes, rolls of microfilm, crypto key lists so sensitive that even Soviet generals handle them like explosives. The KGB officers monitoring Source B-10 Walker's code name quickly realize something extraordinary. This one man, with the help of his expanding network, is giving them more access than all their other American agents combined. The decrypt teams go to work. Every new key from Walker unlocks weeks, sometimes months of U.S. naval traffic. Soviet admirals read American submarine positions as if they were looking at their own fleet. Strategic planners use Walker's data to chart out countermoves, simulate war games, and anticipate U.S. intentions long before American commanders issue their orders. For the Kremlin, this is more than intelligence. It is power. One senior KGB general writes internally, "If this source continues at this level, the balance of naval power in the Atlantic may shift permanently." Meanwhile, Walker keeps feeding them. He moves assignments, switches bases, and leverages every promotion to get closer to new cryptographic environments. With Whitworth now providing high-grade communications materials and Arthur supplying background documents, Walker becomes unstoppable. But spy work breeds paranoia. Walker checks his rearview mirror twice on every drive. He scans his mailbox for tampering. He trains his family on how to maintain cover stories. He even practices his dead drop routes like marathons, always varying paths, always watching shadows. The KGB rewards him richly. Cash payments flow through dead drops, each thicker than the last. Walker starts living beyond his salary. New car, expensive nights out, gifts he cannot explain. But he doesn't care. He believes he is smarter than the system. And for nearly 20 years, he is right. No alarms, no security reviews, no counterintelligence flag, just a silent siphon extracting the U.S. Navy's most guarded secrets and piping them straight into Moscow. But cracks are forming quietly, invisibly inside the one place Walker never expected, his own home. For nearly 2 decades, Walker's operation has survived every audit, every security update, every shift in Navy command. But what he cannot outmaneuver is human nature, especially inside his own collapsing family. His marriage to Barbara is in ruins. Years of manipulation, infidelity, and Walker's strange late-night errands have eroded any trust that once existed. He treats espionage like a second career, but Barbara sees something darker. The lies, the money, the strange envelopes, the unexplained trips. And then one night, she finds the proof. Hidden in a drawer, stacks of cash, Soviet-made jewelry, coded notes, and fragments of Navy documents. Walker has always underestimated her, dismissed her anger, mocked her suspicions. But Barbara is a Navy wife. She knows what classified material looks like. She knows it shouldn't be in their home. And she knows Walker is in too deep to walk away. Fear turns into resentment. Resentment turns into rage. Rage turns into resolve. Barbara begins documenting everything. The dates he leaves the house, the envelopes he hides, the money he never explains. She even approaches the FBI once in the early years, but because Walker cleverly frames it as a messy domestic dispute, agents dismiss it as a family feud. That rejection festers. Barbara promises herself that someday, somehow, she will destroy him. Meanwhile, Walker grows reckless. He recruits his son Michael more aggressively, pressuring him into late-night courier work, bribing him with cars and life advice he doesn't want. Michael becomes the weakest link, not because he's sloppy, but because he's scared. Scared of disappointing his father. Scared of going to prison. Scared of the truth he's helping to conceal. Whitworth, too, is cracking. He hates the secrecy. He hates Walker's arrogance. And he hates that the KGB pays Walker far more than him. Quiet resentment grows between them, dangerous, bitter, impossible to contain. Inside the Moscow center, case officers begin to worry. They sense tension inside the spy ring. They sense instability. But the intelligence is too valuable. They cannot afford to lose the pipeline. They push Walker to keep going just as his world begins to unravel. And then, in 1984, Barbara reaches her breaking point. This time, when she calls the FBI, she doesn't sound angry. She sounds calm, cold, certain. She says 10 words that change everything. My husband is spying for the Soviet Union. When Barbara Walker's call reaches the Norfolk FBI field office, it is routed reluctantly to counterintelligence. Spousal accusations aren't unusual, and most are noise. But one detail stops the agent cold. She mentions crypto keys and communications manuals. Those aren't words ordinary people use. An internal alert goes out, a case file is opened, and the Walker family, without knowing it, becomes the target of a full-spectrum counterintelligence operation. The Bureau begins quietly. No interviews, no confrontations, no pressure. Instead, they follow the money. Walker's bank accounts don't match his salary. There are hidden deposits, cash purchases, and travel patterns that align suspiciously with known KGB courier cycles. Then they pull his duty assignments. Everything lines up too perfectly. Every time Walker changed bases, Soviet capability in decrypting Navy traffic surged. Every time he shifted roles, new categories of classified material appeared in KGB assessments. A pattern emerges: clean, damning, undeniable. Next, the Bureau brings in a forensic finance team. They reconstruct Walker's expenses, his movements, his property records. Everything screams espionage, but the FBI still needs proof. Hard proof. Proof that can withstand a courtroom, a jury, a political firestorm. So they mobilize surveillance teams. Walker's car is tagged, his phones are monitored, his mail is flagged, and his son Michael, nervous, inexperienced, emotionally tangled, is placed under discreet observation. Meanwhile, the Naval Investigative Service, NIS, is looped in. Slowly, reluctantly. No military branch wants to admit a 20-year intelligence breach happened on their watch. But the evidence is rising like a tide they cannot stop. Inside FBI headquarters, analysts gather to reconstruct the scale of the damage. What they uncover is staggering. For nearly 2 decades, Soviet fleets may have known exact U.S. submarine positions. Nuclear strike protocols may have been compromised. Battlefield strategies in the Atlantic and Pacific may have been transparent to Moscow. The CIA, informed quietly, reacts with horror. One analyst says, "If what we think is true, the Soviets have been reading our mail since the Vietnam War." The Bureau now knows 3 things with certainty. John Walker is active. His ring is bigger than anyone assumed. A dead drop is coming soon. They prepare the trap, and for the first time in 2 decades, the KGB's perfect mole is no longer invisible. He is being watched, measured, closed in upon. Spring 1985. After months of surveillance, the FBI finally intercepts a tiny fragment of conversation. Walker telling his son Michael he has one last job to finish. Those 3 words trigger a full operational lockdown across Norfolk and Maryland. Agents know what it means. A drop is coming. A live transfer. A moment when Walker will be caught with espionage materials in his hands, irrefutable evidence. The FBI activates Operation Windflyer, a multi-state surveillance grid built specifically to capture Walker mid-act. Unmarked sedans roll into position. Night vision teams deploy into wooded trails. Aerial units track movement from above. Everyone is told the same thing. Do not spook him. Do not approach early. Let him hang himself. Walker, oblivious, drives toward Montgomery County, Maryland. He thinks he is ahead of everyone, the Navy, the FBI, even the KGB. He believes he has mastered the game. In the trunk, beside him, lies a bag containing classified crypto key, lists, radio telecommunication manuals, encrypted communications codes, handwriting samples, designed for KGB authenticity checks. It is espionage in physical form. It is a prison sentence waiting to happen. At 10:05 p.m., he pulls into Beltsville Agricultural Research Center, a quiet stretch of government land used by hunters and hikers. For Walker, it is a perfect dead drop zone. Isolated, silent, thick with foliage. He gets out of the car carrying the drop bag and a roll of tape. He doesn't know that, 70 meters behind him, an FBI tactical team is lying prone in the bushes, their rifles trained on every movement. Walker kneels by a wooden post and starts taping the drop bag underneath. In his mind, this is just another night, another delivery, another cash payout from Moscow. But then, the forest explodes with light. Federal agents, hands where we can see them. Walker freezes. For the first time in 2 decades of betrayal, his confidence evaporates. He raises his hands slowly, too slowly for an innocent man. Agents move in, cuffing him, dragging him away from the half-secured drop bag. Inside the evidence bag is everything the FBI needs: raw classified documents, espionage tools, and proof that Walker is currently, actively, aggressively working for the KGB. At the exact same hour, in coordinated raids, FBI teams arrest Arthur Walker at his home, Michael Walker on base, Jerry Whitworth shortly after, using financial traces. The entire spy ring collapses in a single engineered blackout of precision timing. Back in Moscow, a coded cable arrives at the First Chief Directorate. 4 words: source compromised, network terminated. The perfect mole is caught, but America still has one terrifying question left. What exactly did he give away for 20 years? The morning after the arrests, the FBI, CIA, and Naval intelligence gather inside a locked, windowless room at the Pentagon. No recordings, no transcripts. Only a dozen senior officials staring at a mountain of documents seized from Walker's car, his home, and his associates. What they find forces the room into silence. Walker hadn't just leaked classified fragments. He had handed the Soviet Union the master keys to the U.S. Navy's communication architecture for nearly 20 years. Crypto key lists, authentication tables, submarine movement logs, radio telecommunication operating manuals, nuclear launch communication procedures. Each deployment, each protocol, each emergency signal had been transparent to the KGB. One analyst runs the numbers and discovers that during the Walker period, Soviet submarines had shadowed American ballistic missile subs with uncanny accuracy. Another reveals that Soviet fleet commanders often reacted minutes after U.S. naval orders were issued, as if they had a duplicate command terminal on their own desks. It becomes clear that the USSR didn't simply read naval messages, they anticipated them. The CIA calls it one of the gravest compromises in U.S. intelligence history. The Navy privately calls it a nightmare we didn't know we were living. Damage assessors draft a 400-page classified report outlining what may have been lost. Detailed Atlantic SSBN patrol zones, anti-submarine warfare maneuvers, carrier strike group deployment patterns, satellite communication fallback systems, and even wartime code activation procedures. Each revelation deepens the sense of panic. A 3-star admiral finally breaks the silence. For 2 decades, the Soviets had a window into our nuclear deterrent. The political leadership is enraged. Congressional committees demand answers. How could one man undermine the entire Navy's cryptographic system for so long? Behind closed doors, counterintelligence directors admit the truth. Outdated clearance checks, weak internal audits, blind trust in long-serving warrant officers, and a culture that assumed loyalty rather than verifying it. Meanwhile, Walker begins talking confident, smirking, bragging about the scale of his operation. He claims he prevented nuclear war by balancing power. He portrays himself as an equalizer, a visionary, a necessary evil. Investigators know better. His treason didn't stabilize the world. It destabilized it. With every document they recover, the full scope of the betrayal grows heavier. The damage report concludes with a line that sends chills through everyone who reads it. The Soviet Union knew more about U.S. Navy operations than many of our own commanders. And yet, the fallout is only beginning. The trials, the interrogations, the political reckoning, everything is about to erupt into the public eye. But one question remains unanswered, haunting the intelligence community like a ghost. How many lives were jeopardized because one man thought he was smarter than a nation? When the Walker spy ring finally goes public, the American media erupts. Headlines scream betrayal. Networks run hour-long specials dissecting how a single Navy warrant officer corrupted his own family and penetrated the heart of U.S. military communications. But inside the federal courthouse in Baltimore, the spectacle feels colder, quieter, almost surgical. One by one, the members of the Walker network are brought before the court. John Walker enters the courtroom, grinning chin up, shoulders squared, behaving less like a traitor and more like a man convinced he outsmarted the system for 2 decades. Prosecutors present the seized documents, surveillance logs, financial trails, KGB correspondence, and dead-drop evidence. It is overwhelming. Every juror knows instantly. This is not a case. It is a confession written across 20 years of espionage. Walker takes a plea deal not from remorse, but from calculation. He admits to spying for the Soviet Union in exchange for sparing Michael the maximum sentence. He believes this final act of manipulation will preserve a shred of his legacy. It won't. He receives a life sentence. Arthur Walker follows, convicted for passing shipbuilding secrets and assisting his brother, 30 years. Jerry Whitworth is next, furious that Walker had dragged him into the ring and desperate to distance himself. It doesn't work. He is found guilty of multiple espionage charges and receives 365 years. Michael Walker, used by his father as a courier, receives a lighter sentence but still loses the life he might have had. As the sentences are read, a strange quiet settles over the courtroom. Reporters expect outrage, tears, explosive statements. Instead, what they see is emptiness. 4 men whose lives have collapsed into the same gray, windowless future. Behind the scenes, the intelligence community continues working through the rubble. Thousands of Navy communication keys are replaced. Submarine deployment patterns are redesigned from scratch. Fleet signaling protocols are rewritten. Billions of dollars in quiet repairs, re-encryptions, and emergency modernization programs roll into motion. It will take years before the Navy fully trusts its own systems again. In Moscow, the KGB is shaken. Losing Walker is bad, but losing the Walker pipeline is catastrophic. For 2 decades, the Soviet military had enjoyed near-perfect visibility into the U.S. Navy. Now, suddenly, the window slams shut. Analysts inside Directorate T refer to it as the blackout. Intelligence gaps widen. Submarine tracking becomes guesswork. For the first time in years, Soviet admirals must operate blind. And yet, even in prison, John Walker remains unrepentant. In interviews, he claims he did it for money, then for ideology, then for balance, depending on which story flatters him most. He frames himself as a misunderstood strategist, a man who kept the Cold War stable. But his own daughter will later say he would have sold out the entire country for a steak dinner. Walker dies in federal prison in 2014 alone, unmourned, and still insisting he had done nothing wrong. But the ghost of his betrayal never leaves the U.S. intelligence community. His case becomes mandatory study material for naval officers, counterintelligence trainees, and cryptologic personnel. His name becomes shorthand for every systemic failure the government swore never to repeat. And deep inside the declassified pages of the damage report, one chilling line remains highlighted by every analyst who reads it. If war had come during the Walker years, we would not have known what the Soviets already knew about us. The perfect mole was gone, but the wound he opened remained.